Look at your life. You are smart, capable, and you know exactly what you need to do to be successful, healthy, and happy. Yet the moment you get close to that goal, the perfect relationship, the promotion, the financial stability, an invisible hand reaches out and destroys everything. You miss the deadline. You start the pointless fight. You quit right before the finish line. You become your own worst enemy. We call it procrastination, anxiety, or bad luck. Freud called it the terrifying truth. Your drive for self-destruction is stronger than your will to live. Freud discovered that nestled within the core of the human psyche is a primal, aggressive drive towards inertia, dissolution, and self-harm, the thanatos, or death instinct. This instinct, often hidden beneath layers of repression, is the architect of self-sabotage. It is the core force compelling you to reject happiness and fulfill a deep, unconscious need for punishment. Today, we will dissect the Freudian explanation for why you perpetually sabotage yourself. We will expose the three unconscious traps: thanatos, the tyranny of the superego, and the repetition compulsion that conspire to ensure you remain stuck in suffering. If you have ever wondered why you can't just be happy, the answer lies in the dark forces you refuse to acknowledge. For Freud, life is a battle between two primal warring instincts that originate in the id: Eros, the life instinct, and Thanatos, the death instinct. Eros is the drive toward creation, connection, survival, and preservation. It is fueled by the libido, psychic energy. Thanatos is the drive toward destruction, aggression, stasis, and a return to an inorganic, tension-free state. This is the engine of self-sabotage. Thanatos doesn't seek literal death immediately. It seeks the dissolution of complexity, connection, and progress. It manifests as an underlying aggressive drive aimed primarily at the self. When the ego blocks Thanatos from outright self-destruction, like suicide, the energy is turned outward as aggression towards others, or inward as chronic self-sabotage. The self-saboteur is unconsciously satisfying the Thanatos drive. By failing, by missing the opportunity, or by ensuring suffering, they are achieving a partial victory for the death instinct, a small step towards inertia and destruction, disguised as a mere mistake. The core of self-sabotage is the aggressive energy of Thanatos being deployed against the self's own best interests. The second, and perhaps most common source of self-sabotage is the superego, the internalized moral police and judicial branch of the psyche. The superego forms during childhood by internalizing parental and societal rules, generating the conscience and the ego ideal, the perfect, unattainable self. When the individual deviates from the superego's rigid moral code, either by having a forbidden impulse, i.e. desire, or by experiencing a repressed trauma that generates shame, the superego demands retribution. This creates the need for punishment. The individual develops an unconscious drive to suffer, because suffering is the only thing that temporarily satisfies the superego's relentless moral debt. Sabotage as penance. Self-sabotage becomes a form of penance. By destroying success, inviting failure, or creating painful situations, the individual provides the superego with the necessary suffering, temporarily reducing the crushing internal guilt. The self-saboteur doesn't stop because they need the punishment more than they need the reward. They feel unworthy of happiness, and the superego ensures that this unworthiness is acted out in reality. Why do you repeatedly date the same unavailable partner? Why do you constantly recreate the toxic environment you swore to escape? This is the repetition compulsion, one of Freud's most profound and terrifying discoveries about the unconscious. The repetition compulsion is the unconscious drive to actively reenact traumatic or painful past events. This is often seen in individuals suffering from childhood trauma or neglect. The unconscious mind compels the ego to repeatedly seek out the same dynamic, like rejection, abandonment, humiliation, not to seek pain, but in a desperate, neurotic attempt to master the trauma in the present that could not be mastered in the past. The unconscious goal is to re-enter the traumatic scene, hoping this time they can change the ending, or at least gain control. Instead, the result is always the same failure and pain, which only strengthens the compulsion. The failure is the goal. In self-sabotage, the repetition compulsion often compels the individual to destroy something good, a healthy relationship, because the unfamiliarity of happiness is more terrifying than the predictability of pain. The destruction confirms the unconscious belief that I am destined to be abandoned or unhappy, which aligns with the original trauma and the superego's judgment.
While the ultimate cost of self-sabotage is clear, the behavior persists because, on an unconscious level, it provides secondary gain, hidden, unintended benefits that outweigh the pain of the failure. Avoidance of responsibility. Success and happiness bring immense pressure and responsibility. Sabotage allows the individual to retreat from the spotlight, avoiding the fear of not being able to maintain the success or the fear of inevitable future failure. If I don't try, I can't fail. The pity-attention dynamic. Self-sabotage often invites pity, sympathy, or rescue from others. This attention, even if negative, fulfills a repressed need for validation and care that was unmet in childhood. The person remains sick or struggling because that state is the only one that guarantees them attention. The moral high ground. By being the victim of their own circumstances, the self-saboteur can occupy the moral high ground, blaming external forces or their own bad luck, rather than confronting the fact that they consciously chose the destructive path. The hidden benefit is the denial of agency.
Self-sabotage is frequently triggered not by failure, but by the immediate prospect of success. This is the fear of success, a paradox deeply rooted in the superego and childhood conflicts. The superego's veto. When success is achieved, the individual crosses an unconscious boundary. The superego may associate success with narcissistic triumph or betrayal of a parental figure. I must not succeed more than my mother did. The subsequent self-sabotage is the immediate, automatic correction to return to the superego's acceptable level of misery. The threat of the new. Success throws the individual into an unfamiliar, unpredictable state of being happy. The unconscious mind, which values the predictability of the known, even if painful, registers success as a severe threat. The self-sabotage acts as a panicked return to the emotional landscape that is familiar and safe. The guilt of joy. The self-saboteur often feels profound guilt over joy. They believe their success must be paid for by subsequent suffering, often stemming from early childhood lessons that link pleasure to punishment. The self-sabotage is the down payment on the punishment required for temporary happiness.
Self-sabotage becomes most acute and pointful in intimate relationships, where the conflict between eros and thanatos is most visible.
The fear of fusion. Healthy intimacy requires the fusion of two lives, eros. But for the self-saboteur, this fusion is terrifying because it means the loss of the ego's autonomy, which is seen as a threat to survival. The individual unconsciously believes intimacy equals engulfment. The preemptive strike. When a relationship becomes truly stable and loving, the unconscious mind senses the threat of abandonment or eventual pain. Driven by past trauma and thanatos, the individual launches a preemptive strike, a sudden, irrational fight, an act of emotional infidelity, or a withdrawal to destroy the relationship on their terms. By becoming the one who initiates the destruction, they gain a false sense of control over the inevitable pain. Displaced hostility. The individual often harbors repressed hostility towards a parental figure, thanatos. Since attacking the parent is impossible, the hostility is displaced onto the loving partner. The self-saboteur creates the drama, ensuring the partner is driven away, satisfying the aggressive impulse and confirming the neurosis that love always ends in pain.
The self-sabotage engine runs constantly, manifesting in specific, observable neuroses in daily life, all designed to ensure that potential happiness is avoided. Procrastination. This is self-sabotage dressed as laziness. The delay ensures the quality of the work is compromised, fulfilling the unconscious goal of failure and providing the secondary gain of avoiding the responsibility of succeeding. Perfectionism. This is the superego's weapon. The standard of success is set so impossibly high that the work can never be released or completed. The pursuit of perfection guarantees inaction, which is a perfect form of failure. Chronic illness or accidents. The thanatos drive can manifest as psychosomatic illness or a tendency toward accidents. The illness forces the individual to stop pursuing success, granting them the moral right to fail, secondary gain, while providing the necessary suffering, need for punishment. The body becomes the literal instrument of self-sabotage. The addiction cycle. Addiction, substance, behavioral, is a form of self-sabotage where the individual substitutes the raw pleasure of the id for conscious, productive work, ensuring the chaos required for the superego to remain active and punitive. The only way to stop the self-sabotage cycle is to drag the unconscious forces, thanatos, the punitive superego, and the repetition compulsion into the light of the ego. The goal is to integrate the instincts, not eliminate them. Acknowledge thanatos, conscious aggression. You cannot destroy your death instinct, but you can channel it. The aggressive energy must be acknowledged and directed outward constructively into competitive sports, vigorous exercise, or intense intellectual debate. Give the instinct an acceptable target so it stops targeting the self. Challenge the superego, adult judgment. Consciously challenge the source of your guilt. Ask, whose voice is that punishing me? Is that rule still valid for my adult life? Only when the guilt is consciously processed can the unconscious need for punishment subside. Break the compulsion, the new ending. The next time the repetition compulsion is triggered, for example, you feel the urge to start a fight or miss a deadline, pause. Consciously choose a new response that is unfamiliar. For a relationship, choose vulnerability instead of aggression. For a project, choose completion instead of procrastination. This act of conscious will rewrites the traumatic script. Accept imperfection. Recognize that happiness is not a perfect state, but a constant, messy, and imperfect process. By accepting the inevitability of human error, you lower the impossibly high standards of the superego, robbing the self-saboteur of its most powerful weapon. The trap is invisible only as long as you refuse to look. The path to a happy life requires not more ambition, eros, but the conscious mastery of the dark force, thanatos, that is relentlessly working against you.